Hello, and welcome to tonight's event, Stacey Dooley and the Strictly Orthodox Jewish Family. My name is Deborah Vogt, and I'm the performance programmer at JW3, where we showcase the very best Jewish arts and culture in the UK and across the globe. While our program is online right now, we will be reopening our building to the public at the end of June, which is incredibly exciting. As many of you know, while the building has been closed for public events, it's largely operated as a food bank throughout the past year, and it will continue to do so. Meanwhile, cultural events and conversations, such as tonight, have gone online and given us the opportunity to reach a wider audience. This evening's event, like much of our online program, is entirely free, and if you'd like to donate to support our work, you can do this through our website. Our program of music, theater, film, and discussion forges connections and encounters with the Jewish community and far beyond, and that's what tonight is about. Bridging boundaries is at the heart of this conversation, centered around a very warm and open encounter between Stacey Dooley and Rabbi Mordechai Wollenberg. This event will be chaired by a TV and radio producer and presenter who's been at the heart of many remarkable stories throughout her career. It's my big pleasure to give a warm welcome to Wendy Robbins.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I'm Wendy Robbins, and welcome to this very special JW3 Q&A for the new series of Stacey Dooley Sleeps Over, which is currently airing on W Channel. Now, we've had a selection of questions submitted in advance, so I'll be asking these throughout. But for now, please welcome our special guests, award-winning documentary maker Stacey Dooley and Rabbi Mordechai Wollenberg of Woodford Forest Synagogue. Hello, both.
Wendy Robbins, how are you?
I'm very well. How about you?
I'm delighted to be here with the pair of you. Wendy and I have worked together on numerous gigs for a couple of years now, and I hold you in such high regard. So thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Stacey, nice to see you again.
Oh, Rabbi Mordechai, I'm
First
so
time you two are reuniting.
I know, but not the last. Not the last.
Well, you said in the program you're going to be my non-Jewish friend, but you never call me, you never come round.
I am your non-Jewish friend, but I know you're crazy busy, so I don't ever want to, be a nuisance. But I would love.
I feel a Friday night dinner coming on.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, we owe you an invitation because, of course, you couldn't make it, and people won't know this from watching the show, but the rest of the crew actually stayed for dinner that Friday night. So, Stacey, we owe you a Friday night dinner, so you have to come round sometime, definitely.
I would love to. It'd be a total honor. And I'd love to see the kids. They're such sweethearts. I would love
Off
to see them.
camera, obviously.
Yes.
but still no swearing.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty and the details about this particular episode, which was absolutely fascinating, the first series of Stacey Dooley Sleeps Over was the most watched show of the year when it aired on W in 2019. What is it, do you think, about this particular format that makes it so successful?
Do you know what, Wendy? I think it's because the premise is really simple and really straightforward. I think sometimes, when you're sort of trying to think of the next big thing in television, you can overcomplicate things. And in essence, this is about going into a family home here in Britain and trying to understand what this family looks like, what's important to them. And I think it's really important. I think increasingly, it can sometimes feel a bit tribal and a bit we're all a bit polarized. And, are you a Brexiteer? Are you a Remainer? Are you left? Are you right? What do you read? Who do you vote for? So I think it's really healthy and a real privilege to just meet people that I wouldn't normally go about with, No,
I think one of the nice things is that you see through the episodes the things that actually unite us, as well as the things that divide us.
There's always more we've got in common. Always, always, always. You can fundamentally disagree with them on one thing, but you see that, you're two human beings coming together and having a grown-up, calm, rational conversation. It's wicked. I love it. I love this series.
That gives us hope, doesn't it? But, so obviously, Stacey, we've worked together. We've spoken about my Judaism, and you've been often getting your head around some of the complex Jewish issues with me. But how much did you know about the Orthodox community that you were going to stay with, represented by Rabbi Mordechai?
Well, it will come as no surprise that I didn't know a huge amount. I certainly wasn't a hive of knowledge. I sort of do my basic due diligence, because I don't want to walk in completely ignorant. So, I don't want to offend anyone either if there's sort of real hard do's and don'ts. So I try and sort of keep them in the back of my mind. But you also want to go in with a very open mind, and you don't want to have too many preconceived ideas. So I learned loads. I learned so much from the minute I walked into, Rabbi Mordechai's home, and I had a blast. Genuinely, this is not me sort of, PR spiel. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Rabbi Mordechai's gang. I thought they were lovely, so warm, so accommodating. It's not a given that you're going to open your front door and say, come in, because really you've no idea what I'm going to ask. So, yeah,
especially with the Orthodox community, Rabbi Mordechai, because we don't often get to see behind closed doors, and we don't often get that first-hand experience of living with an Orthodox family of 11 people.
Right. So when we were asked to do it, it was really interesting because I think it started actually. It was just after the end of 2019. There'd been a lot in the news about Labour Party anti-Semitism, and we were approached by the producers that were looking for a sort of obviously Orthodox Jewish family for Stacey to sleep over with. I don't think they told us who it was in the beginning. They just said a famous presenter. I did say, well, we're interesting because we straddle different worlds. Because obviously I'm a community rabbi. I live in a very diverse cosmopolitan community in the suburbs, but my family and myself are obviously very strictly devout. So hopefully that's a USP that, we cover different angles. Some people might say, well, it doesn't show real kind of, insular orthodoxy, but hopefully it's a good balance. And that's what our lives are. It's kind of a sort of a paradox in many ways.
So, Stacey, you knew very little about the Orthodox community. Rabbi, how much did you know about Stacey Dooley?
So, it's funny, I don't have a TV, and yet somehow I seem to get bombarded with news. So I'd heard of her from Strictly, and I Googled her, and the first thing that came up was all these kind of Ross Kemp style documentaries where she's really in your face, like going after all these, dangerous people. So I said to the producers, this doesn't sound quite, they're like, no, this is a very different format. It's much more, amiable and friendly. I think it's a really lovely format, actually. And it was really strange for us because we've not had too many guests in the past year, obviously. Stacey was our first kind of sleepover guest for a very long time. So first of all, it was very exciting for the kids. And I think my son sent you a Rosh Hashanah card. Wow. So, they hadn't seen a real person in quite a long time. So it was really nice. And also, look, you hear different. Somebody said to us, what's it like having a celebrity in your house? So look, occasionally meet famous people, meet the chief rabbi and things. Everyone's a human being at the end of the day. What's nice about Stacey, she's very down to earth, no pretensions. She's very friendly, very warm. There's a shot where she was boiling the kettle. She did actually make drinks for everyone. That wasn't staged. And she even got the right side of the kitchen as well.
I was thinking, right, this is a kosher kitchen, Stace. All you've got to make sure is that you don't get the two, because there's sort of two separate
the milk and the meat
areas. Exactly right. So I thought just make all the cutleries where it's supposed to be.
You did great. But it was actually you're very approachable and easygoing. I don't think you let the celebrity status go to your head, and that's really nice, honestly. And also, we don't have a TV, so we didn't know who you are anyway. So
not missing much.
I think Stacey was quite taken that the kids had never heard of her, and we asked the kids if they wanted to be on screen. Some didn't, so some of them don't really appear, and some appear more. But
the ones who didn't want to be on television, what was the reason? What was their reason for that?
I don't think it's deep religious conviction. I think they're just a bit shy, and that's fine. Very strongly believe in empowering your children, that they have a voice as well. Just because they're young doesn't mean they don't have feelings, and that's something that we feel very strongly about.
And out of interest, just to clarify, why don't you have a television? Why don't Orthodox
don't have a television? So obviously, I kind of out of religious ideology. We feel that most of the stuff on is basically rubbish, as Stacey said, and it's a waste of time. And I suppose want the kids to do wholesome things. Look, I mean, we do have devices, we do have internet access, we are connected, if you like. But I guess it's a thing that in the very religious community, people generally don't own a TV. They just see it as a waste of time. It's bringing a load of rubbish from outside into your home that you don't necessarily need to bring. And to be honest, I don't have time to watch it anyway. So it did amuse us that obviously we're going to be on TV and we don't own a TV. Actually, one of my very close friends who was very inspirational in my life is Rabbi in Rebbetzin in Birmingham on campus, Rabbi Fisher Lester Cohen. And they ran a TV show 25 years ago, and they also don't have a TV. It's hilarious. We started a WhatsApp group, TV stars who don't own TV sets.
I think you meant to say before, it brings a lot of rubbish apart from Stacey's documentaries, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it brings a lot of good things as well. But we also...
rubbish ones of them, I've got to say.
In the discussion we had, Blim and I, what message are we sending the kids if we're on TV, but we don't allow them to watch TV? And we did explain to them that, the reason we agreed to do this was to educate people, and we felt we have to put ourselves out there. You know, it's not entirely comfortable. We got used to it. And I'm used to, when I started as a rabbi 20 years ago, I couldn't stand up in front of people and speak. I was nervous. Now I'm used to it. I stand up in front of 500 people. But I mean, a couple of the guys said to me when they were filming the Friday night service, you know, everyone's like, oh, just act normal. When you've got a camera in your face, Stacey, I guess you're used to it. But when you've got a camera in your face, it's a bit of a different experience. You know, it is quite daunting and intimidating. But again, the crew were great. They made us feel at ease. They gave us, you know, they asked us how you want to portray things, you know, what angle do you want to show? Are you comfortable with this or that? So whilst we didn't have the editorial control, I definitely felt it was very respectful of our wishes, you know, and the finished product is definitely what we would have wanted. You know, I don't think there's too much to criticize there at all, which is really nice.
It's lovely to see the bond between the two of you, given that you inhabit such different worlds. And I wonder what those first moments were like for you, Stacey, when we saw you go through the door, being like, hi, everyone, here I am. And Rabbi Mordechai couldn't even shake your hand.
That's right, yeah. Well, I remember saying, you know, because we made this months and months ago, but I remember saying to the team, I would really, really love to be able to immerse myself into an Orthodox Jewish family's world, because I do feel like it is privileged access. And that's where I commend, you know, Rabbi Mordechai and the family, because it requires courage. So I was just delighted that we were sort of given the thumbs up. And actually, I wasn't that shocked that we weren't able to shake hands, because, you know, I grew up in Luton. So lots of my pals were sort of, you know, from Islamic families. So I could never shake their father's hands. Right. So, you know, it was never like, oh, I can't believe, you know, he's sort of.
But I think we kind of staged that a bit, didn't we? Because, of course, with COVID, no one shakes hands anyway.
Well,
so
that's very true.
You know, I've spent the last part of my professional life politely explaining to people that I have certain boundaries, which may be a bit, you know, meshuggah, which means a bit crazy in Yiddish, but everyone has their boundaries. These are my boundaries. You know, I'm sorry if that offends you or whatever. But, you know, I'm just very strict about this. And with COVID, so I'm sorry, I can't shake your hand. I should jolly well hope not. Of course not. Unless you're the Prime Minister. Yeah, but it was good that we got that in, because, and also, like, you know, I think it's about people talking. You know, we spoke very openly about things. Yeah. I guess it's also my role as a rabbi. I have people in the community who say, you know, I'm Jewish, I go to work, I work in, let's say, you know, a solicitor's, and people will say, oh, John, you're Jewish. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Now, I don't mind that. It doesn't bother me, but some people just get fed up with it, you know. So I'm all about education. So that's fine. I'm not offended if people come up to you in the street and say, why this, why that, if it's respectful. I actually love it, because it's a chance to talk about your faith and so on. So I enjoy it. We probably spoke more about Judaism than I do in an average week, because average week I'm busy doing all the things that modern rabbis do. And we sat and talked about my faith for hours, you know.
Yeah. And Stacey,
it's a difficult balance to get right, Wen, because as somebody who isn't Jewish, you want to do your own research. And I'm really mindful. I read an article once and I thought, God, that's so true. My ignorance, or the things that we don't know, shouldn't be on minority groups. It shouldn't become their admin to tell us everything. But also, you do need to ask questions to evolve and to grow and to understand. So, you know, you don't want to push your luck, but also you want to ask the person that actually it's their life.
Right. Also, I recognize that some things are going to seem strange, and I think you have to be able to laugh at yourself as well. You know, if you're kind of like a bit self-deprecating, it makes people feel at ease. And also, just to put it into context, you know, we have a very diverse community that we're working in. We're used to having guests. I'll give you an example. You know, you don't use electronics on Shabbat. You know, it's not unusual to have had a guest around the table says, oh, you know, I lost my mother recently. Here's a picture of her, pulls out their phone, and you have to deal with that without showing any kind of acknowledgement that it's inappropriate, because you would hurt someone's feelings. Yeah. And so I think and our kids have grown up with that understanding as well, that you have to respect everyone and put people at their ease. And a lot of our life until COVID was about having guests in our home. So our kids have grown up with like Friday night guests. So they're kind of used to the idea that it's very important to make people feel comfortable. So, and there's plenty of Jewish people that say, oh, I'm invited to the rabbi's house. I don't know what to do. I might make a faux pas. And it's actually really nice. Like, for example, when people come around for Shabbat, and my kids are the ones that push the electronics or whatever, because you can see people are horrified, but it just makes everyone feel at ease, because, you know, I think it's fine, you know, it's okay, you know.
Talking about the Friday nights, I think what was interesting, Stacey, is that I know, you know, you know about the concept of Shabbat, the Sabbath, kosher, but you've never actually experienced it. So I wonder what experiencing that Shabbat was like for you, with all the do's and don'ts.
Well, from a TV perspective, it was quite tricky, because we're trying to get an hour's content in 72 hours. So you arrive on the fun day. You arrive on the Friday, leave on the Monday. But actually, we knew that we weren't going to be able to film in Shabbat, so we'd already lost a bit of time there. I was really helpfully really unwell on the Friday. I had like this ridiculous migraine, so I was in and out of the synagogue car park. So I thought, God, I'm going to be totally mortified if I throw up on the carpet. So we had to think, right, what do we need to prioritize here? And we just wanted to get the kind of, I don't know if hysteria is the right word, but the kind of the craziness of trying to prepare for those moments where you're not able to do anything.
Right.
And
ironically, you weren't with us. You weren't with us for the whole Shabbat. So in a way, you're welcome to come and stay one Shabbat, and you can see what it's like. It is a different pace. Now the crew came round for Friday night. You weren't feeling well, of course. The crew came round with the cameras off, and it was really nice to socialize with them. It's a whole different experience. So they got a bit of a taste of it.
I would really love to come and experience
please
that.
Do, seriously.
Stacey, what did you think of some of the preparations? Like we saw the children tearing the toilet paper.
Of course. Blew my mind. I had absolutely no idea it would be that detailed and that intense. I understood that you couldn't work, and actually it was about kind of, ceasing any work until the sunset. But I didn't realize that we weren't allowed to light a flame, so you weren't allowed to put the cooker on. You weren't allowed to tear anything. So if you needed to go to the toilet, there needed to be toilet roll that had already been ripped. The kids were immaculate, but that meant that, Lima was running around doing all the washing, so everyone looked the part, and there's like 9 children. So I could not believe how much work. It's like Christmas Eve.
Every week.
That kind of, you're running around and you can't find the sellotape, and who's got the scissors, and have I got my nan's gift, and it's that kind of vibe.
And how you do all the cooking before as well.
The batch cooking.
So we're always a bit amused when Christmas time everyone gets so panicky about making one meal, and we say, but we do this every week.
It's a really good comparison. It's very similar.
And despite the sort of oddness of those things, Stacey, was there anything in terms of the spirit of Shabbat, in terms of disengaging from your technology, stopping work, and just getting into the family, having conversations, reading, singing together? Anything about that, the spirit of it, that you felt struck by?
Of course, no, it's really admirable. And I think I don't place enough emphasis on making sure that, right, do you know what, this time is set aside for my gang, the people that I love, my family members. I'm not going to entertain any distractions that, are associated with work. And also just not having your head in the phone for hours and hours. I am so guilty of that. And I'm 34, so arguably I should know better. But, the kids aren't on their phones. They're playing games together. And I think that's what...
So it was an interesting time. Because of COVID, we were at home a lot. And in some ways we weren't as busy as we normally are. But actually, I'm watching the program, and I am on my phone quite a lot at dinner. I don't even realize it. And I can certainly, for myself, Shabbat is the one time in the week that I do things with my kids. I'm completely with my family. I switch off. People know I'm switched off. And the rest of the week, it's constant. It was quieter when you were with us because there's not as much going on. But in normal times, it's terrible.
So it is about being present, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not. I mean, people often say, "Oh, we could come up with an app that will read out your texts, and you don't have to do anything, and you're not breaking Shabbat." But do you actually want that? I don't. I'm quite happy with it. The detox.
And also, when I get on a plane, which I mean, in my old life, remember when we used to be able to get on planes?
That's what we used to do. Yeah.
And you're on a long haul flight, so you haven't got the internet and you can't use your phone for 11 hours. I do feel different. I am in a different place, and I'm sort of thinking about things and contemplating and etc. And then as soon as I land at, I don't know, LA or whatever, I'm rattling around trying to find the Wi-Fi like a maniac. Like there is something to be said for just having very definite boundaries.
And there's a beautiful phrase. I think it was Achat Ha'am, who was a poet, who said, "More than the Jews have kept the Sabbath has kept the Jews." Because as much as we've kept it in the religious sense, it's preserved our family life, our community, our pace. It's the one time in the week, you switch off. Most people, I think, in the community do something Friday night, even if it's just the Kiddush prayers. Or like when I was a student, most people stayed in Friday night. They may not have done anything Jewish, but they stayed in. It's a very cultural thing. You know where your kids are on Friday night. You know,
it's a bit like my Catholic, families in Ireland years ago on a Sunday.
Yeah.
I mean, some playgrounds weren't open. It was all
Mhm.
about sitting around the kitchen table and having something to eat together.
So many years ago, when I told one of my other non-Jewish friends when I was growing up that I couldn't come round to their house on Saturday, really, because we were doing going to synagogue and doing Shabbat lunch. And I said, it's our day of rest. They're like, oh yeah, like we do that on Sundays. Yeah, I get that. We have Sunday lunch. I don't know if people do that anymore, but they used to.
Not enough. What about the 9 children, Stacey? What was it like immersing in such a large family?
And do you remember all their names?
I knew you were going to say.
Test you.
I knew you were going to say that. Don't ask me to listen.
I don't.
In chronological order. They were so lovely, like little Israelek. He was 13. Is he still 13?
He's just turned 14.
Oh, he was like my guide, really. He was probably my best pal. So he came back from school, because when I arrived, the kids were at school. And then when, sort of slowly the kids all started coming back, and it was just, the house just comes to life. And, he was talking me through everything, and he was introducing me to the girls, and, there was like Gabriel, there was babies, and then the older lads, 9 children. I mean, and Blima's so chill. Sometimes you meet mums and they're sort of shouting and bawling. I mean, that's my mother, sort of shouting a lot of the time. Blima's just very sort of relaxed about the whole thing. I suppose you have to be if you've got that many kids.
So we didn't coach them at all. Like, we didn't say, I'm the sort of person that when we have guests, I say to kids, you must behave. We're on show. I'm very bad like that, and I shouldn't do it. I actually remember the first time that the producers came round to talk about the show, and they had dinner with us, and I was like, no, you must be on your best behavior. And my Blima says to me, just calm down, relax, So I have to say, even me, we didn't coach the kids. It was really funny, because there's one bit it didn't feature, but they asked the kids, what's the best bit about being Jewish? And they're like, oh, the food. I'm like, oh my God. We send our kids to these Orthodox schools. They learn Torah all day long, and that's what everyone would say, the chicken soup, come on. But we didn't coach them, and they carried themselves very well. I was pleasantly surprised how much they could articulate their beliefs and their understanding, because it's
everybody watching was.
It's something we take for granted, actually. I have to say, our kids all go to very religious schools. We kind of take it for granted that it happens by osmosis, and it's really nice they were able to articulate things in quite an everyday way that hopefully was understandable, because they're going to have to do that in their lives. What
did you think about the discipline within the family, Stacey, and the children?
I mean, I've got to say, it didn't feel, to me, it didn't feel particularly rigid. It felt like they were well-rounded, happy kids. And we're there for the entire, we're there for the weekend. So you can tell if, kids are sort of on good form for an hour or two, and then they're getting sort of scolded around the corner. There was none of that. They were just really pleasant. I'm not just saying this. They were really pleasant kids. And
we do get a lot of compliments on our kids. It's really funny, because at home they can be a nightmare. They fight and they argue. But at school, and when we go out, they're perfect. It's so funny.
I really enjoyed their company.
We once went to a restaurant. Am I allowed to name it? We went to.
Go on.
Yeah, we went to Orly's on Brent Street a few years ago, and Orly herself, the owner, was there. And we don't often go out. We don't fit in the car, and the kids don't really appreciate restaurants. But we went out, and we had toasted sandwiches, I don't know, egg and chips, whatever. And at the end, she came over and said, "You guys were so well behaved. I want to give you a complimentary dessert." And it was so nice. Because first of all, it was nice because obviously we like it when we make a good impression, but it showed the kids that people do actually notice when you behave, because people are very quick to tut and roll their eyes. It was so nice. It was a really nice moment.
A moment, Stacey, in the program where I think you're passing on the stairs and you see all the kids with their mum just singing, and you said something about it was very joyful.
It was just idyllic. It's when you're reading these old books, and it's sort of like a bit of a fairy tale, and there's this beautiful family that live on a hill and they're all in love. I mean, they really do. My upbringing was much more chaotic, and I was probably a bit more of a nightmare, and the back door was open and my pals were in and out, and my mum shouting, "Where are you going? Have you got your money for the chippy?" And who I adore, and she adores me, but it was a totally different temperament. Yeah.
I think we live in a bit of a bubble. I guess, most of the people we know and mix with are relatively kind of traditional families to some degree or another. We are a very stay-at-home kind of family. We both work from home. I'm out crazy hours because of my job, but then I'm also home. I do see my kids throughout the day, and I guess we take it for granted. But then sometimes somebody will say, "Oh, it's so nice that you spend time with your children, or that you have family dinners." And oh, actually, yeah, it is quite nice.
And they're quite interested as well. You know, they're interesting kids, but they're interested. So they'll ask you questions as well. What do you do? Where have you been? Where's your favourite country? La, 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 you know.
One of the things that came up in the programme was how you preserve the traditions of the religion, but also be part of the modern world. And I know Stacey asked you a question in the programme about, do you have non-Jewish friends? And you were saying that, in fact, she offered herself a special friend. But what about the children? And in terms of, because that's one of the criticisms that often gets levelled at the Orthodox community, that they tend to keep themselves and aren't as much part of the world as they could be.
My kids definitely have primarily Jewish and primarily quite religious friends who are similar to them. I like to think that they've been taught to respect everyone and they can mix with anyone. And in fact, when we lived in Liverpool, they were actually in King David's School, which is about 15% Jewish. And they did have quite a number of non-Jewish friends. Obviously, there are always challenges. We have challenges with Jewish friends as well, where say it's not strictly kosher and things like that. I can only speak, we're probably a bit different because we live quite a kind of, this kind of hybrid life where we have to be involved in the wider world. So I think my kids are quite exposed to a lot of things. Also, we're very honest. And I know when the kids saw Christmas lights for the first time, some people say, oh, that's not kosher. No. They're lights, it's not our religion. And we said to the kids, yes, it's a certain time of year and it's a non-Jewish holiday and people have lights. And light is an idea in Judaism, so we didn't validate it as something we believe in. But they're aware of it. They know it exists. They pick up things. It's amazing what they pick up. And hopefully one of the most important messages they pick up is to be respectful to everyone, whatever their religion or religious level. I think the bigger social issue for us is not so much, are you Jewish or not? How do we respect you? It's people with different religious levels. And the challenge for me as a religious Jew is I want my children to believe that we should keep the faith. I also want them to understand that you can respect people who don't do things the way we do. And I think hopefully we've achieved a good balance of that. We have people who always say they feel very comfortable around our Shabbat table. If it came up in conversation and somebody said, well, obviously it's okay to drive on Shabbat, I would say, well, obviously we don't believe that, but we also believe in not judging people and not going around telling people what to do. It does occasionally happen. Someone will say something that I feel has to be corrected. But most of the time, we get on fine. Like I said, we don't coach them. We don't censor what goes on. Most people are quite respectful when they come around. I think we find a balance. But I was thinking about it the other day. If my children become rabbis and rebbetins, I'll be very happy. It's quite possible they won't. What happens if they go out into the workplace where suddenly they're in a completely different environment? I hope they've got more tools than most people because they've had quite a broad experience in their lives. I mean, most of them were homeschooled and then went to a school that was majority non-Jewish. So they've had a broad life experience, which I'm quite grateful for. But, there are things we do that we wouldn't take our kids to because at the end of the day, we are religious Orthodox Jews.
Like what, for example?
Well, okay. So I said to Blima, should we go around and watch the show in someone's house? She says, oh, it's too embarrassing. I don't want to do that. She says, I'm the one talking about my bedroom. You weren't even in it. So I'm not sure we would take all the kids around to watch it. They have seen it. We fast forwarded it 1 or 2 bits. They don't watch TV generally. And yet it's a show that we're in. So there's kind of an irony in that. If I get invited to a social event, people say, Rabbi, we're having an event at home. We'll get kosher food in for you, having a party or something. Can you come? Most of the time it's usually appropriate. I once got invited to a wedding. I went along and they had extremely scantily clad dancing girls, if that's the politically correct term.
They're like a Strictly.
Worse. And they couldn't dance as well. But not that I was watching. But the father of the groom said to me, I'm so sorry. I didn't know this was going to happen, Rabbi. It's so embarrassing. So there is I wouldn't take my kids to something like that. I might go because of my role. I kind of have to learn to be very tolerant of things that I wouldn't do for myself. And at the end of the day, we are like, I don't shake hands with women. I'm very open. I'll talk. I'll have a laugh, bit of banter. But if somebody's going to have a problem with that, I am probably too Orthodox for them. I don't hide that.
But do you think if other Orthodox families like yours put themselves out into the world a little bit more like you do, maybe 1 foot in, 1 foot out, there'd be more understanding of your community?
I think so. I mean, there's a big push in America, something called Project Inspire, where they're saying to people, to religious people, if you know someone who's a secular Jew, invite them round for Friday night. Let them see your family. It's not that scary. They're not that scary either. Just get to know each other. I think we're quite blessed in that because of our role, we get to mix with a very broad spectrum of people of all faiths. And I do enjoy that. I think it's a very big plus. I actually spoke about it in my sermon a few weeks ago, that if you go to sort of large centers of Orthodox Jewish life, like Stamford Hill or Golders Green or New York or Jerusalem, there's hundreds of shuls, synagogues. You will find a shul for people like you, people, I don't know, Ashkenazi or Sephardi. They want a early service, a late service, a faster one, a slower one, more singing, less singing, more English, whatever. Here, I go to synagogue, there are people across the spectrum of everything from the Jewish community, all under one roof. And I find that very special, actually. I love it.
I want to move on to talk about love and relationships, because that was quite a big theme through the program, particularly the relationships between men and women, husbands and wives. Stacey, what was your insight into that area?
Well, like you just made the previous point, I think sometimes people who aren't Jewish can think Orthodox Jewish families are so insular. And so what happens then,
Stacey's frozen there for a minute.
Oh, can you see me?
We can. Oh, that's better.
I'm sorry. Oh, no, I'm just saying, you're right. I think sometimes when people perceive families to be very insular, they come to sort of their own conclusions. And I think sometimes that's what's happened when you look at the relationship between a husband and a wife with Orthodox Jewish families. So again, without being sort of too gratuitous or trying to sort of provoke unnecessarily, I was just trying to ask the questions in a very respectful manner. And I said to Blima, look, what you're comfy offering, you let us know, and actually she was very generous, and it didn't feel like we were sort of being, we weren't sensationalizing for the sake of it. They were genuine questions. And it was like, well, how do you two interact? I mean, clearly this is a successful, healthy marriage. So many marriages are toxic, and, there isn't that sense of unity. What does your relationship really and truly look like? And I really appreciate her being so candid. And
I think that's something probably a lot of people wouldn't talk about. And there was always an aversion to talking about one's private life, not because, it's really interesting. We help prepare a lot of couples for marriage, and we learn a bit of kind of Jewish philosophy of marriage. And one of the things I always emphasize is that a lot of the language we use around human intimacy and sexuality, like dirty, naughty, is not actually what Judaism says at all. Judaism sees human relationships as a beautiful thing. It's the first mitzvah, the commandment is to go forth and multiply. But you do it in a private manner. You don't discuss it with your guests around the dinner table. So in that sense, that's probably the most awkward moment, not because of Stacey, she was very good, but just because it's not something we normally talk about openly, not because we're ashamed of it. It's not dirty at all. It's very holy, but it's very personal. So that was probably, and I don't think, I'm sure if there's any criticism that the kind of the more Orthodox community might have, they might say, how can you talk about that on camera? But I think the answer to that is, someone's going to talk about it. Better it should be us telling it like it is than conjecture. We didn't even talk about the hole in the sheet.
Agreed.
Not the hole in the sheet, Stacey.
But that's the thing. You have these lazy stereotypes that you think, it's just about this hole in the sheet, and then you sort of ask questions that are going to get these sort of tabloid-like headlines.
Right.
They've been together for years. They've got, there's children involved. You just want to have an honest conversation about, what marriage looks like and feels like for you. Really.
Stacey, for you, as a obviously modern secular woman, very much in the modern liberal world, I wonder what it was like discovering some of those issues. For example, that the woman is considered unclean during her period and goes to the mikvah.
I went to my first mikvah.
What did you think?
It's really important to be honest. I can't say that I totally understand the emphasis placed on making sure that the woman is pure again after she's had her period. But it's not for me to understand. It's for me to respect that it works for this family. I suppose my only concern was, oh God, are we sort of subconsciously telling younger girls that periods are dirty? They're such a natural thing, and we do it every month. But again, the girls taught me through that.
I think
not to be able to be touched when you've got your.
I think that's one of the few points I would have you watch it thinking, oh, it's a shame we didn't get to qualify that, because the term unclean obviously sounds awful or impure. Interestingly, the Bible often doesn't use that term. It will say not clean, which sounds the same, but it's slightly more sterile. What I would have wanted to just mention was that the idea of going to mikveh generally is associated with any loss of potential life. So when you come into contact with a dead body, according to the Torah, you have to cleanse yourself in a mikveh, which is flowing waters. Why do you go to mikveh when you've had your period? Because it represents the loss of a potential life. It is a bereavement. It's a grief process. And for people trying to have kids, they can really relate to that. After childbirth, you go to mikveh. Why? There's nothing impure about that. Because interestingly, and it's really interesting psychologically, and I've heard people tell me this, one of the reasons that often you can experience a sense of loss after you give birth because you're no longer carrying the child. So mikveh is associated in Judaism with any vacuum, any sense of loss. So whilst there is the terminology we use is in Hebrew is pure and impure, it's kind of unfortunate because it's much deeper than that. You've suffered a miniature bereavement and we do something life affirming, which is immersed in the water. And there's all kinds of myths. So the reason you don't touch your husband is not because you're impure, it's because you're abstaining and you're focusing on other sides of your relationship at that time. And anecdotally, it's really interesting because we're always pleasantly surprised when couples that got married a few years ago and they say, actually, we've been keeping that mitzvah and it's really meaningful for us because we lead a busy life and once a month we get to spend a bit of time together in a kind of spiritual friendship framework and it feels very holy. So I think it's always how you frame things. But then I'm a believer, so I'm going to say that, I mean, Stacey brought up the question of the blessing. We say, that God didn't make me a woman. There are all kinds of explanations.
Just to elaborate, that's the blessing in the Torah, which says that the man says, thank you, God, for not having made me a woman.
So there's all kinds of explanations. The classic one is because we don't have to go through the pain of childbirth and because we have more religious obligations. But I accept how it appears to people. And I don't think it's worth getting into long discussions. As I said to you on camera, there's so much else in our liturgy. And there's definitely other things people could take issue with. I mean, actually, one of the most amazing things to me as a community rabbi is we have a prayer book, which is 1,500, 2,000 years old. The fact that it still talks to people at all is a miracle. Never mind one line here and there,
But for me, that's why these weekends are so important. And I'm so proud to be a part of this series because you have these conversations and you come away from the conversation with a totally different perspective. Do you know what I mean? Religion broadly has never really appealed to me. Never say never, but has never really appealed to me for various different reasons. But I suppose one of them is I'm not totally down with the idea of segregation, but that's not exclusive to Judaism. That's many religions. So you talk these things through and you learn and you evolve. And
because I think you're a bit surprised about the separation and segregation in the synagogues where the women were at the back. Yeah. And the rabbi, you explained that a better way.
It's unfortunate. It doesn't have to be
down the middle, but it's still a separation.
Sure.
And it goes back to the idea, I think, that a man will always be distracted by a woman and won't be able
or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
So we can focus on our prayers. Yeah. I lucked out actually because I made pals with this really sweet lady who was at the back with me, and she was really, really lovely. And I was saying, I'm not sure which page I'm supposed to be on, and she was really helping me, trying to keep me up to speed. I didn't know where I was supposed to be.
Well, you weren't distracted.
If I could just come back to that actual question, Wendy, because it's interesting watching the program. I think there's two sort of, I don't want to say conflicts, but tensions. One is the tension of an Orthodox Jewish family in the modern world, and sometimes things that clash for us in our own lives, like the use of technology or how we implement the Shabbat in modern terms, or even food is much more complicated than it used to be, and relationships and all these kind of things, which is one aspect. And as a sort of, I guess, an Orthodox Jew who lives in the modern world, I don't see that as being a conflict in my life. I can find a harmony between those things, and I'm comfortable with that. And then there's as Stacey alluded to, how I as a rabbi have to communicate those ideas to a much wider audience. And we touched on things like alternative lifestyles and the challenges that go with that. And, that is a real challenge for me as a community rabbi. And Stacey actually captured it, I think, very nicely by saying, I'm trying desperately to convey things that I believe in and that I hold dear, but at the same time, in a way that, people will accept. And that is a much bigger challenge in my own community.
One thing Stacey was impressed with, if I'm right, is that you're trying and you don't give up.
And I think it's important to recognize, I have to recognize that, I think both Blim and I would recognize that so for example, some communities will have, let's say, women only services, or my wife doesn't feel that's something she needs, but we recognize there are people who might not feel the same way as us. I don't assume everyone thinks the same way as me in terms of their Judaism. So I recognize that different people are going to have different challenges and different issues, and they may have problems with certain things, and I have to try to help them through that. Not just say, oh, it's just the way it is, like they did in the previous generation. Oh, because, we're very compliant. We just do what's expected of us. It's okay to ask questions. It's good. There's a beautiful thing from Rabbi Sachs, the late chief rabbi, who's a very special person, a mentor of mine personally in my early years, where he said, the biggest compliment to a Jewish parent is not when the teacher phones up and says, Rabbi Wollenberg, your son gave me a great answer in class. It's when they say your son asked a great, or your daughter asked a great question. And it's so true. In Jewish learning, we say, oh, you asked such a good question. That's a brilliant question. We always encourage people to ask and to delve into things. The whole Talmudic learning is about questions and answers. We're not afraid to ask questions. And if anyone says they are, I think that's mistaken.
I think religion, you know, when you're looking at something as massive as religion, I had similar conversations with a family in the first series, actually, a Mormon family, who, you know, we had slightly different views on certain things. And it's obvious that this topic is going to always pop up because it's something that's so important to me. I suppose I truly believe in my heart of hearts that, you know, if there is this higher being and there is this God and he adores us all, then I just don't believe that he cares if a woman loves another woman or a man loves another man, or, you know, what color we are, or what, you know, who we vote for, or, you know, where we pray or how we pray. I just imagine him to be less judgmental than that. Do you know what I mean?
And a lot of my life is not spent on those issues, to be honest. Most people don't come. You know, I visit a lot of patients in hospital. It's comparatively rare for someone to say, Rabbi, you know I'm not getting any better. I want to talk to you about the afterlife. Most people, it's Rabbi, there's not enough kosher food choices here. Or it's very mundane things. It's helping people with their practical everyday lives. You know, a lot of the events we're doing are social events and cultural events and just kind of networking and connecting. One of the things we've seen the past year is the importance of connection. You know, do I like to study religious texts with people, have theological discussions, help them to grow and understand? Of course I do. Is it a large part of my day? Not really, in the modern world.
But what surprised me as well is how many people you are on call for. Like, it's hundreds and hundreds of families, hundreds of families. Like, and actually they feel like they can call you any time of the day because actually, you know, you're their rabbi. I mean, the pressure of that, trying to make sure that hundreds of families are feeling like they're being listened to. I can't.
And you know, line between the modern and the Orthodox table as well.
And you know, there's a famous, everyone always bands about this saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I don't know who said that originally, but it's so true. And a lot of what I do is pastoral work, and people actually don't care what shade of Orthodox I am, or they just care that I turn up when they're in hospital, or when they have a bereavement, or when they have a baby, or, you know, that's the expectation. It's to be there for people. And, you know, I've had lasting friendships that I've made with people that I met through bereavements, and we've kept in touch because as somebody said to me many years ago, and I didn't appreciate it until he said it, a very close friend of ours said, you are very privileged that people let you into their life. Well, a bit like you, Stacey.
Yeah.
You know, as a rabbi, people will share everything with you. They'll share their family, you know, happy occasions, sad occasions, their emotions, their most deepest things, they will share with you. They'll let you in. They won't let anyone else in. And it's very true. It's actually a very privileged position to be in. And you're right. I mean, it's funny. From time to time, people say, can I give your number to somebody? I say, you don't even have to ask. Forget GDPR. It's out there in the public domain. I gave up long time. We don't have your number, by the way, Stacey. You've done a good job of keeping it secret. But, you know, I gave up a long time ago. You know, it's a fact of life. People need to get hold of me. I'm a rabbi. I'm on call, you know. I want them to be able to reach me. I don't get crank calls, thank God. But...
Can I ask both of you to reflect back on that scene partially captured on camera in the programme where your family, Rabbi Mordechai, was shouted at and abused by people in the street? Stacey, what was that like for you, that moment?
As you'd imagine, I was angry on the family's behalf. You know, it's just so disheartening because I think sometimes I wrongly kind of convince myself that we live in this really sort of metropolitan, very accepting, very inclusive, very diverse part of the world. And actually there's so many things that we do brilliantly, and compared to different parts of the world, you know, we are certainly heading in the right direction. But the idea, and the thing is, the lads that shouted the abuse, the kids were there. So I was really angry about that because I didn't want the kids to have to listen to that nonsense. And what I was really impressed by is Rabbi Mordechai's dignity. And you didn't even, you didn't feel the urge to kind of respond or kind of try and justify yourself. You just calmly walked into the house. And actually, I wish I was I was less reactive because
I'll tell you the truth.
I was so gutted that happened. But actually, we got it on camera, and that happens.
So I'll tell you the truth. I used to be somebody that would be shaking after something like that. As a parent, it's like I'm scared of bees and wasps, but I've had to kind of man up for my kids' sake, because otherwise they, it rubs off on them. So if I was on my own, I'd probably feel very uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, the kids are around, and the truth is, it was a big gift they gave us because it allowed us to get it on camera. My lived experience as an obviously visible Jew, and my older boys wear kippot and they travel on public transport. And I've got to say now, lived experience is it's extremely rare to get any aggravation at all. I know there've been some incidents in recent weeks, and it's horrific. And the community as a whole are very scared. We're seeing a certain edginess which hasn't been there in a long time. I think, as the chief rabbi put it, it is a blot on the landscape that exists, but it's a dot. There's plenty of good things going on. As a obviously religious Jew, I lead my life. I walk around, I drive around. I don't encounter prejudice on a day-to-day basis. There are areas where you would, but I don't. Where I am, it's very quiet. People are very nice and tolerant. And it's only right to say that. My lived experience is a positive one. That was a very exceptional situation. Doesn't happen often at all. The only reason I'm glad it happened is it allowed us to talk about it in the program, which I think is important.
Because it is getting worse in so many areas.
It is getting worse. And in a way, I suppose I'm a bit, I don't say extreme, that's the wrong word, or fundamentalist, but I am fundamentalist in the sense that I'm not going to take my kippah off. That is who I am. But there are a lot of people who are perhaps on the fence. Somebody's gone to university and they're wondering whether to join their Jewish society or go for Friday night, but they're a bit nervous that their housemates don't know they're Jewish. And then, something like that happens. They're like, do you know what? Forget about this. I'll just go, I'll keep my identity under wraps. And that is so sad. And I will say it, I will come out and say it. There is an element. I obviously look very Jewish. A lot of Jewish people don't necessarily, it doesn't jump out at you that they're Jewish. So when we talk about ethnic groups and prejudice, this has come up recently. People don't think of Jews necessarily as a group that's on the receiving end. And yet we all know that we are. So it's a difficult one. We look white and Caucasian, most of us, although we're not actually, we're very diverse. But so there are assumptions made which are not always true. But my own experience is 99% no problems.
What surprised me, I mean, lots of things surprised me, but what surprised me is how much CCTV is required for Blima, for Blima to feel safe, essentially, and to make sure that, nobody is trying to graffiti the synagogue, and make sure that, when the kids are in the house, you feel well protected. There was a huge amount of CCTV, and I know that's the case for lots of other. So we have CCTV. We have panic buttons are connected to the police. Ironically, the reason we have panic buttons actually primarily is we had a bad experience years ago with somebody in the Jewish community that shook us very much and made us realize our vulnerability. And we've always had a panic alarm since then. But it's preventative. It's a few years ago, there was a program, I think it was around Rosh Hashanah, and the then chief constable of Greater Manchester Police somebody said to him, isn't it a disgrace that Jewish schools have all this security? He said, you're right, it is a disgrace. It's a disgrace that they need it. We are very lucky where we are. It's very quiet, but we all know stories where there have been attacks and things. And also CCTV is a fairly normal thing to have nowadays in a sort of mosques as well. I was filming in, I can say the location, but I was filming
somewhere
in another part of the UK yesterday, and there was a mosque. I was parked outside a mosque, and there was loads of CCTV there as well. There's lots of sort of. I
mean, the last time we needed to review it was probably 4 years ago. So let's put it in perspective. It's preventative, but yes, we are very security conscious, both as an institution and as a family. But then we still live our lives. And it's interesting, something's changed. I'm from a slightly older generation. My parents' generation did not wear kippot in the street. If you were very religious, you wore a hat or a cap. My generation and my kids' generation, they're much more kind of open about it. And they don't have an issue with it, if that's their thing to do. And I think the advice, if you go back to when I was growing up, there's definitely a sense that if you want to wear a kippah, that's fine, but you should wear a cap or something when you go out. Now, I think that there's a much more of a sense of you should not be ashamed of who you are. You should be able to walk down the street and just like anyone else wears headgear. And that is not grounds for you to be attacked, So we don't say to the kids, oh, don't wear your kippah or whatever. Just say to them, be sensible, be careful. I was going to say, don't walk past the pub at closing time, but number one, closing time doesn't happen. The pubs are closed now. Well, they're open now.
We're all struggling with those things at the moment. There's some cars, Stacey, that came over a week or so ago in London. There was some really horrible abuse being shouted out about music. One of my kids was about to go out to Golders Green to meet some friends and was wearing quite a big Star of David, and I actually found myself saying to him, I'm not really sure you should be wearing that tonight. And he was like, but Mum, why should I hide who I am?
Yeah.
And there was a real moment where I thought, which way do I go here?
Mm.
And I did actually say to him, take it off now because it's night and it's dark. Maybe wear it again tomorrow. And I don't know whether that's the right thing or not.
Well, there is a sense, isn't there, that
In those instances.
I was going to say, I also don't want to project my own. I sometimes have insecurities about these things as an older adult. I don't like walking home alone at night generally, but I don't want to project that onto my children. They don't have it, thank God. You know, they're comfortable going out in the neighborhood. They're sensible. You know, they don't do silly things. I also think, you know, if somebody said to me, Rabbi, you must take your kippah off for your safety, that's when it's time to switch the lights out and go live somewhere else. You know, if you can't identify with your, you know, basic beliefs, you know, we're supposed to live in a democracy, you know. Now, thankfully, no one said that to me.
Mm-hmm. Can I move on to lovely Blima, your wife?
Yeah, she sent apologies, by the way. She's lost her voice. Not from shouting at me. Everyone always says, oh, she's been shouting.
She mentions in the show that she feels she's seeing her faith with new eyes as seen through Stacey. And I just wondered what her reaction was to the program when you watched it.
I'm going to have to speak for her now. She was a bit embarrassed because obviously it was as she said to me, you're not the one talking about the bedroom life. That was me. I ended up on camera. I think I was out hospital visiting or something, conveniently. I think she felt pleased with the way it came out. She's quite a private person, so being out there for everyone to see was quite daunting. And I guess you often have that with TV subjects, you know, the realization everyone's going to know your business, you know, even if your business is perfectly kosher, as it were, you know. So I think she was a bit daunted by that. But I think she was pleased with how it came out. And I know she watched it the other night. She enjoyed it, got a sneak preview. And she said it was very enlightening, the things that we kind of don't think about that other people pick up on. I think she mentioned we didn't show the scene where we went shopping, but you asked why there's so many candles on the shelves. What do you mean? We have candles for everything. Oh, but we take that for granted. That's part of our life. Explain it, you know.
And Blima was very lovely. You know, she's so warm. You know, there's another woman coming into her house and asking these personal questions, hopefully in a respectful way, but asking the questions nonetheless. And actually, she was wicked. You know, when we left, she sort of, thank you ever so much, Stacey. You know, and actually, we show the families the films before they're broadcast, just to make sure it feels like a fair representation and check for sort of factual accuracies, etc. And Alice, who was the series producer on this, I think, did Alice come and show you it?
Yeah, we had a whole viewing. Yeah,
and I said, what was your first reaction?
Yeah.
So we thought it was pretty good. We sent the kids out for the bedroom bit. We felt that wasn't age appropriate for all of them. But we quite enjoyed it. I think it may have changed very slightly since we saw it. But yeah, we were quite taken with it. I mean, you're always thinking, oh, there's so many things you could have included.
Yeah.
You probably always, I don't know how you edit it down 45 minutes and you've got so much footage. It must be so hard.
I feel exactly the same. Sometimes you'll be filming for 2 or 3 weeks and you'll remember a moment where you articulated a point very clearly. And, you know, you look very smart in that moment and you're desperate for them to use that piece of camera. It never sees the light of day.
It's like our wedding video. My wife always complains the guy that shot it got all the wrong angles of everything. And he didn't give us the raw footage. He gave us an edited version. So he missed out loads of things we wanted. You know.
Yeah. But Stacey, I know you watched Orthodox, Dissel programs like that. And I think
unorthodox, presumably.
Unorthodox, sorry. Yeah. Unorthodox and Dissel. And I think that's where a lot of people have got their viewpoint and their insight into the Orthodox community, where it talks about forced marriages and stifling natural career choices, that kind of thing. So how much did your perceptions change immersing yourself in a real life Orthodox family?
Without sounding sort of too cheesy or too earnest or too Miss World, I really try and make these.
What's Miss World?
You know, like when you're sort of holier than thou, you're trying to become. I mean, I'll never become Miss England because I don't look like Miss England. But anyway, but you know, without sort of sounding too wholesome, I really try and take people as I find them. And I've met so many people over the years from so many different backgrounds and. I just thought, let me see what I make of this. And to be honest with you, the idea of this series is not to kind of conclude, you know, I've had 72 hours. And so to conclude, Judaism is this, you know, to be a rabbi means this. It's just not about that. It's about filming authentic scenes, wrapping them up in a hopefully sort of coherent narrative, and then handing it over to the viewer and saying, make up your own mind. Mm-hmm. And all I can say is I had a thoroughly lovely time. I would love to continue our friendship. And yeah, I look forward to our Friday night dinner.
You have to give me your number. So we
give it to Alice.
I want to say to you both, most memorable moment for you, Stacey, in your time with the Rabbi.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, well, two things. When I first walked in the house, Blima was showing me round, and you walk into the living room and it is stacked sort of floor to ceiling of books, mostly religious books. Yes.
Whoa.
So you walk in, it looks like a library. And Blima says, so this is a copy of the Torah, which is obviously the holy book. And she hands it to me, and I'm sort of trying to be on great form, and I'm on my best behaviour. And it just like nearly falls out my hand. And I'm like, so I'll grab the book, and then she says to me, Stacey, if that was the real deal, if that was the real Torah, if you drop the Torah, everyone in the room has to fast. And so that was like one of the first things we filmed, and I thought, oh my goodness, no, I just don't believe this. Like, also just so mindful of my language, because as you know, Wendy, sometimes I am too sweary, so I really wanted to make sure my language was kosher.
And Rabbi, the most memorable moment for you?
It's funny you mentioned that, because having watched it, and it's not a particularly sort of, deep theological moment, but it's when Stacey said, I've been really good. I haven't sworn for the whole 72 hours. Said, normally I swear a lot. And I said, I didn't even think about it. It was just off the cuff. I know, I've seen your videos. And we had a good laugh. And it was just like a couple of friends hanging out. It was really nice, and there was that atmosphere. We were all, we all got along great. There was no tension, and that's how we want people to feel in our home. And it's funny because I watched a bit of the trad wife one. I almost would have expected us to be like that, all very traditional roles. And we'd probably come across a lot more modern in some ways. So yes, we're these strictly Orthodox Jews that can't touch each other for whatever. But on the other hand, in some ways, we're more modern. And so I don't think people fit into neat pigeonholes,
I know we've got to wrap it up, but I'm so excited for this to air, because I really want people who maybe don't know a huge amount about Orthodox sort of Judaism, or don't have any Orthodox Jewish friends. I would really love them to just watch this and just see you as a family. I think it would dispel so many myths that currently exist, maybe.
So I think that would be fantastic. Rabbi Mordechai, are you up for doing more television? Could we see a UK shtisel in golden screen or something?
So confession time. I watched Unorthodox. I felt I had to, because everyone was talking about it, and I felt it was a very, very poor portrayal, very unfair in a lot of ways. Just whatever. I haven't watched this, so my wife tells me it's very good, and it's just a very, again, the impression I got is it's a very warm portrayal of just ordinary human beings with all their foibles. Look, if it had some benefit to it, I'm enjoying a bit of celebrity status at the moment. Kind of, it's exciting being in all the papers and being on
the TV star with no TV.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll become I
don't want you having Louis Theroux around your house.
Right. Maybe I'll become one of these influencers. I suppose I am an influencer by being a rabbi.
And do you think we're going to get Stacey for a whole Shabbat without her phone?
Well, I don't know. She's very welcome to try it. Maybe we'll have a bet. Oh, we don't bet. We're not betting people. But I'd be happy to do it if it has some benefit and it could help people. As I said, it's about education. I wouldn't do it just for the voyeurism, But I felt this was a very good vehicle, and it hopefully it will generate some positive feelings around different cultures and different communities. And it's all good, as they say.
Well, thank you both so very much for speaking to us. The final episode of Stacey Dooley Sleeps Over airs on Monday, the 7th of June at 10 p.m. on W. And all episodes so far, including the wonderful one we've been discussing today, are available to catch up on Sky, BT and Virgin. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Wendy. Rabbi Mordechai, thank you so much.
Pleasure. We'll be in touch. You have to come around for Friday night.
Wow. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Stacey, Rabbi Mordechai, and Wendy, and all the team who made this happen today at JW3 and UK TV. That was such a wonderful conversation. And thank you to the audience for being here. You are all welcome to come back to our building when we reopen at the end of June with a full and exciting program. And if you want to be the first to find out about all the special events coming up, please do sign up to our mailing list. Thank you again, and good night.